everyone. I'm Kristy Ryan from Relion Insurance Solutions. I'm the loss control specialist here, and we're very proud to be able to bring this session to you today. I spent a lot of times visiting with many of you, and I've been hearing over and over again the challenges that you're facing with getting employees to do all of the extra work that you're doing. Business is booming, we understand that, but having the employees that you need to continue to be successful has been very challenging. So we partnered with Skywalk Group to bring you this session today, and we hope that you have a lot of great takeaways. A little bit about Relion for those of you who are unfamiliar with our agency. We have locations in Iowa City, Iowa Falls, Kelowna, Muscatine, Victor, and Williamsburg. So we're really scattered throughout Eastern Iowa. We offer a wide array of insurance products, including personal lines, commercial, as well as financial services, including group benefits and individual health. And then our value-added services, such as loss control, claims advocacy, and HR resources. We're very proud to announce that we have recently been named a top workplace for 2021. Today's speaker is Samantha Rogers. Samantha is the Human Resources Business Director at the Skywalk Group and a proud 40 Under 40 award recipient of the class of 2019. She is certified as a senior professional in human resources and has successfully partnered with over 150 organizations to align their strategic initiatives with their daily operations and workforce culture. Samantha serves as the Student Liaison Chair on the Eastern Iowa Human Resources Association Board and is a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion member of the Junior League of Cedar Rapids. Samantha's training specialties include building education and training programs based on identified core competency deficiencies and senior leadership training. We're very proud to have Samantha present for us today. So with that, I am going to hand that off to Samantha.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to share screen and start presenting. Kristy, can you see the screen?
I don't see it just yet.
All right, let me share screen.
There we go.
You can see it?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, and I'm presenting the PowerPoint. So again, thank you for having me today. Relion Insurance Solutions. We are a proud partner of yours. And just to get things warmed up, hopefully everyone has coffee today. The way we like to present at the Skywalk Group, I feel like we've all been in on those presentations where everything is written on the slides, and we could have saved everyone time by just sending out a PowerPoint presentation instead of having a live event. So hopefully you have something to take notes on. And again, I encourage any questions to be sent through the chat or to Kristy directly. So thank you again for having me. Let's begin. Okay, so the Skywalk Group, we were established in 2003. So we have almost 20 years of experience in human resources, recruiting, and training. So we are a local women-owned business based out of Cedar Rapids, but we have clients all over the world, actually. We mostly specialize here in the Midwest, but we work with organizations of all size. So our tagline and what we do best is we attract, we train, and we retain employees. So that's important because this is how I split up my PowerPoint today. We're going to talk about attracting people, retaining people, and training them based on what's changed since 2020 as we were operating on processes that seemed to be working, and then we had to rethink things very suddenly. So moving on, we have the Great Resignation. Not sure if many people have heard of this yet, but if for those of you who had, you may have been already feeling an impact. So SHRM predicts, which is the Society for Human Resources Management, they predict that 40% of the US workers these days are either looking for a new job or will be soon. So while people were scared due to the COVID pandemic, the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, I heard over and over again as we work with multiple organizations, goodness, thank goodness I'm employed. I'm so thankful I have a job and I don't have to apply for unemployment insurance every week. I'm so glad I'm employed. I'm not going anywhere. Well, since things have gotten a little better, people are starting to get vaccinated or immunized because they have since developed that due to getting COVID. People are starting to shake the thank goodness I have an employer and think, okay, is the grass greener on the other side? And we're seeing that, and it's being coined many different terms, but one that resonates with me is the Great Resignation. So if you have not already been impacted by this, they say it is coming, and it is coming for all industries. As of now, 56% of the people are leaving because of their managers or how the organization is handling or has handled the culture surrounding the pandemic. So thinking as you were communicating with your employees, as you were making decisions about staying working at the office or how working remotely or any hybrid solutions, as all of this was communicated and decided, this has a big reason for why people are leaving, but also it is that I've hunkered down, I was safe through the coronavirus. Now, what else is out there? The who. So there's a lot going on right now in our culture that we haven't had to worry about before. So another few terms that you may have heard, one is called the silver tsunami. So one thing to think about as we are recruiting and attracting and retaining people is that the baby boomers are entering their 60s. So we are starting to see many traditional workers work further into age. So we're not seeing as many people retire at 65 anymore, but we're also seeing people approach that age trying to retire early based on fear of being at the workplace, or maybe pensions are coming up. We are seeing the labor force change where those baby boomers are exiting. The other piece that has really thrown a wrench in here is the millennial effect. So as millennials are in the workplace, we are seeing people change jobs very frequently. So before the pandemic, I think we were averaging about 3 years would be the time that it takes for any one employee to be at an employer before they start looking elsewhere. We were lucky if we were going to retain any one person for 3 years. That is changing now. And one of the reasons why is that the millennials have decided, hey, I'm young, I may or may not have a college degree, this workforce is changing, let's start looking elsewhere, and I am even open to switching industries altogether. So in the past, where we had seen people who specialize in finance start off in a career in finance, maybe have 5 to 10 years of experience, the millennials are starting to say, I don't mind that I already have 10 years of hard work in this industry, what else is out there? I'm prepared to take a pay cut and jump ship. So that is something that's also changed. And then the final thing is the Gen Z entrants. So they have and are graduating from college. They are 60 million strong, and they are entering our workforce with expectations. So more than half of those that are graduating right now expect to someday work in a job that doesn't even exist in today's market. So many pieces are technology based, cybersecurity based, doing things completely remote. Some of these jobs haven't even existed yet, and that is what they are demanding and expecting as they're going through coursework in universities or coming straight from high school. So these are some things to keep in mind on the who. Up next, we have the why. So why are people leaving? There are many, many reasons, but some of them are better compensation elsewhere. Right now, with the hiring market being so difficult and there not being enough qualified candidates out there, someone who's never even worked in an industry or someone who has never even managed before, if they interview properly and they can make a good case for themselves on why they can be successful, people are offering higher compensation just to find qualified applicants these days. So again, grass is always greener. Compensation is one. Better work-life balance is a big one too. So I'm personally seeing with those employers that we're working with, if they were interested in going remote, some of them are recalling people back. And for those employees that got really used to staying from home, having that work-life balance, making lunch, being so close to that kitchen, saving time on a commute, they know that there are other employers out there that have operated successfully 100% remote, and they're looking for those positions now. So that's some of it as well. Better benefits. Benefits change every year, whether or not those premiums are going up or down each year, making sure that they're covered for the things that they have. One big piece that they are looking for now that they weren't necessarily preoccupied beforehand was paid sick leave. So if I do get sick, whether I'm exposed to COVID, whether I have COVID, whether I have a sniffle, and I don't want to get anyone else sick, can I stay home and be paid for it? Career advancement has always been one. So I've been, let's say, a junior here, and I've worked there for 3 years. Where can I make that next step? Because I'm not seeing, my employer isn't talking to me about advancement right now. And then that last one I wanted to cover was just a career change. We're starting to see millennials say, I don't mind that I've invested 10 years in this field. I want to see what else is out there. So as employers, we want to be sure we have almost scripts as we're working with our organization and our employees on how we can talk about compensation, we can talk about benefits, and we can really shout from a mountaintop why we should be retaining employees. And we'll talk more about that. Other factors, there have been so many things as employers that we've had to deal with since 2020. We all are aware of the coronavirus pandemic, but as we have developed almost an immunity to the shock that's been in our lives so much in the last year and a half, is that people still are scared. So we have people who do not want to come into the workplace, who do want to come into the workplace, who are afraid to go to work with a sniffle. People and employers have to work through this now as things are changing. Another thing as employers that we needed to work with was the pandemic unemployment assistance program. So these were minimum payments for individuals who were not working. The minimum was about $203 per week, and the maximum was $493 per week if you had 0 dependents, and $605 per week if you had 4 dependents or more. So this made it very convenient for people without a job to stay at home and be safe. This was one of the big reasons that the hiring market was so difficult. Now, the PUA, this ended on June 12th, 2021 in the state of Iowa specifically. So we hope that that's had an impact on the labor market, but it is still very difficult to hire and retain right now. ARPA was another one. So the American Rescue Plan Act. 2 things that ARPA really did was it extended the FFCRA, which is the next ones listed here that we'll talk about. And it also gave more provisions for the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP. So those 2, the FFCRA and the PPP, were scheduled to end much earlier. However, they have been around so that employers can take advantage of them. So FFCRA is actually scheduled to end on September 30th, which is this week. But what the FFCRA does is it provides 2 weeks of paid leave for COVID and COVID exposure provisions. And back in April 2020, it also had some healthcare initiatives. So if people had employees with children and their schools were closed, this also compensated them for that time. And then the FFCRA was to reimburse employers for paying this time in the end of the year with tax credits. So this is actually a voluntary program now. It was originally mandatory, and it is ending September 30th of this year. The Paycheck Protection Program is a loan program with forgiveness provision to retain employees instead of doing layoffs. And this is still in the works here, thank goodness, for some of those small employers who have access to this. The stimulus checks were another reason it was hard to hire. The IRS data that we looked up, it tells us that 478 million were paid out in stimulus checks. And this does include the provisions from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. So tons of dollars are reinvested in employee or in non-employed individuals out there, which has made it difficult. And then finally, COBRA. So there was a COBRA subsidy that came out that if an employee did lose their job, there were many provisions, but one way to summarize is at no fault of their own. So for example, if there was a layoff, COBRA subsidies temporarily mandated that employers are paying that COBRA subsidy instead of the employee paying that premium. And again, there was going to be a credit that came at the end of the year when they filed taxes. So this COBRA subsidy also ends 9/30. So a lot is happening this week. Finally, the derecho, that also scared people when it comes to work. When the derecho happened, the cell phones weren't working. When you didn't have internet or even power, it again just reinforced employees thinking about their work-life balance and what's really important in life right now. So I know that Relion is based in Iowa City. They also experienced some of the derecho. Cedar Rapids was hit so hard, and the surrounding communities, they're just varying levels of how this impacted employers and employees. So we're jumping into the first part, which is attract. This is number 1 in the Skywalk Group's attract, train, and retain. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our solution, which is an on-recruit model. It's an RPO solution, and then we'll jump into other things that you can do as employers when it comes to attracting those candidates right now. So what is an RPO? An RPO is recruitment process outsourcing. So instead of having a contingency recruiter who will go out, find qualified candidates, and then throw you a bunch of candidates to screen and decipher on your own, the recruitment process truly is a process. So instead of paying that 30 to 40% contingency model, you would be paying an hourly fee for the process of those recruiters going out to find candidates that work for you. So an actual team member at the Skywalk Group would serve as an extension of your team. They would boost your employment brand, and they would streamline those processes for faster hires. So who we find and who you would get as the employer, they would be pre-vetted, pre-phone screened, pre-prepped, and by the time you get candidates, you may receive the top 3 to 5 people who have already been screened, and it's really up to the employer at that point to choose the candidate that works best for them and organize that hiring process. So this is a little bit about OnRecruit. What it does not do is hire temporary employees. We also do not promote ourselves at the Skywalk Group while serving your business. We become that teammate of yours, and then we are advocating for your employment brand. And then finally, again, there's no charge for those placement fees. It is simply the flat hourly pricing to find those candidates. And my favorite thing as a human resources individual about this program is we can take the post and pray method, where you post, see what's out there, screen, and then start interviewing. However, with this OnRecruit program, someone is actually going out and finding those passive candidates. So the people who are qualified that aren't even exposed to or applying for your positions. That sounds like a great recruitment model, but in the real world, many of us just don't have time to do that. So love that you can outsource this process. The next part is getting employees engaged, or even candidates engaged. Back in 2019, the OnRecruit department at the Skywalk Group, they had an average contact attempt number of about 8.5. So if someone applies for your position or doesn't apply for your position, we just found them and they are perfect for your position because they are in our pipeline, we would communicate with them on average 8.5 times. So that would be, hey candidate, thank you for applying. Let's set up that interview. Hey candidate, don't forget to come to that interview. Okay, now, hey candidate, your employer wants to move forward and interview you. Let's schedule that. And then, hey candidate, we are ready to offer you a position. So about 8.5 times is what we were averaging in 2019. Now in 2021, we are up to 11.8. So it doesn't sound like a huge increase, but what this means is in order to even get these candidates engaged, even the ones who have applied, we have to reach out more times to keep them interested and remind them that they're excited about this position. That's the way we've had to change to be successful when it comes to the recruiting model. It's keeping those applicants and those people we have sourced fresh and interested. Not sure if people on this call have heard about ghosting or even experienced ghosting, but it is affecting multiple clients we are working with. Ghosting is another term of no call, no shows. And ghosting could be happening whether it's an interview that's scheduled or when an actual employee has been hired and doesn't show up for their first day or doesn't show up for their third week. It's just a no call, no show. I'm not employed here anymore, or I'm not interested, and there's no reason why. So when it comes to scheduled phone interviews at the Skywalk Group, we are seeing anywhere between 30% to 60% of no call, no shows right now. That is huge. These recruiters, and I'm sure the recruiters within your own organizations, setting up these interviews, people are just not coming. We anticipate or predict that these are higher because there isn't an actual commitment of being in person, as many people are doing these phone screenings and actual interviews remotely. But even the in-person interviews, we're seeing anywhere between 20 and 45% no call, no show on average. So across all the clients we're hiring. This is thanks so much. We're excited to move forward with you as a candidate. Please show up so we can meet you, and people are not. On one production client, so we just surveyed one production client to get some statistics for you. In the past 3 weeks, 72 people have been scheduled to start and only 51 showed up for their first day. This is one client in the production industry. People who have done all the paperwork, put in the time, they are just not getting excited because there are so many different opportunities out there. So it's crazy the market that we're working in. With the shift to remote work and remote employees, we're seeing an increase in sudden departures from those recent new hires, like we said. So ghosting is a thing. Hopefully you have not experienced ghosting. And if you have, we need to be learning why people are leaving so we can prevent this from happening again in the future. Time to fill comparison. So again, we talked about before the derecho, maybe roughly 2019, and what's happening now in 2021 post-pandemic. According to a report by the Aberdeen Group, when and if you use the on-recruit process, it's reduced the cost to hire by an average of 48%. So if you're ready to use a recruiter that can become a teammate that is not employed with your organization, that on-recruit model really helps. An average increase of 67 in hiring manager satisfaction is also something we're proud of at the Skywalk Group. And even though we are experiencing ghosting, it is still a 60% reduction in time to fill. So these are some ways that we can help if you're interested in using that RPO model. Now, let's get to the how. What can you do internally to make a difference with your recruiting and attracting measures? So here we have the hiring life cycle as written by a human resources director. So a few things to think about when we go to hire. These may seem elementary, but in my experience, people skip many of these steps. They go into a routine and they backfill positions as they exist currently without thinking outside the box. And I think we need to start doing that more as employers. So the first one is perform a needs assessment. So just because someone has resigned, heaven forbid, ghosted us, just because we have that open position, do we really need to fill that position exactly as it was staffed before? Or can we think outside the box to see what do we really need? Are there pieces from another department that this position can help with? Do we really need a full-time person, or could this be part-time? Do they need to be in the office 40 hours a week, or can they be remote or even hybrid? Just because Susie, for example, was in the office 40 hours a week, do we need to backfill that position? Exactly. So number two is when we develop the posting, we want to make sure that we aren't putting any unnecessary screenings in there. So one big example is if this position truly does not require a bachelor's degree, we should not be having that on the posting anymore. It could be weeding out people who have 20 years of experience and could get just as much done. It could be weeding out some more diverse applicants who may not have the actual education, but still could do the job well. We want to make sure when we're developing the posting, we're not putting any unnecessary screenings on there. Another example is the Ban the Box initiative. So asking people if they have been convicted of a crime or if they have a felony, we may or may not need to ask that. And if we are asking that, do we have a policy that would explicitly say why, if you had X felony charges, it would disqualify you for working for this position? So we just want to think about those postings and those screening methods. That employment application is really important too. We want to be using that for every candidate so that it's consistent. And again, that Ban the Box initiative, our recommendation, it's not mandatory yet, but our recommendation is to remove the question about felonies from your application. Advertise the open position. So when you advertise, of course, we put it out there, but think about where we're putting it out there. If we are hiring for, let's say, a mechanic, and we put that position on Indeed, are we sure that mechanics who have the expertise that we're interested in actually truly have access to a computer, the internet, and will be looking on sources like Indeed? We've seen employers get more creative with postings on Facebook. I've even experienced some employers posting on Instagram these days. When it comes to where we're advertising for the position, we want to start with the end in mind and say, where can we find the candidate pool that we're interested in? Many times it's actually boots on the ground that will get you those candidates that we need. Interview for the position. When we interview, again, we don't want to put any discriminatory language in there. We want to be asking questions about the job skills specifically, instead of questions that simply are rooted towards, are you a good fit for our culture? That can include, that can really prevent hurdles when it comes to implicit biases. Finally, candidate selection. We want to make sure, again, it's not simply because this person does or does not fit in our culture, but we need to put on our objective hats to say who is the most qualified and what will help us most when it comes to this workforce, as we are finding these teammates that can really help take us to the next level or maintain what we have now. So you'll see the graphic here is coolest places to work. The Skywalk Group is the experts in designating those coolest places to work. We partner with the Corridor Business Journal, or the CBJ, to actually hand out and do a vetting process for the coolest places to work each year. But I post this here because I'd like you as employers to think about what makes you individually cool or unique. As the Gen Z is coming into the workforce, even as the boomers are exiting, we want to be sure we know what really sets us apart from our competitors and from even the McDonald's down the street that's offering $15 an hour now. What makes us different, and how can we sell someone on our organization and what makes us cool? Outreach programs such as diversity and inclusion initiatives are huge right now. It would, one, expand the pool of applicants that you'd be working with, and two, you would have a more diverse culture to welcome newbies to. Compensation is another one. When's the last time we've done a compensation study to make sure that we are providing our employees with competitive rates out there in the marketplace, or to make sure that we're not even discriminating on accident or on purpose within our walls, and that we're giving everyone an equal chance to succeed. Another one we're seeing people do to attract candidates are bonuses. I've seen several sign-on bonuses, but as an HR person thinking long-term, my favorite way to use bonuses in attracting candidates are more retention bonuses. So maybe you have a $500 budget allocation for new hires. Maybe that looks like $250 as a sign-on bonus, and then the other $250 if you stay with us a year or 2 years or whatever that might look like. like. Bonuses is a good way to attract candidates, and you can also have referral bonuses. So if you, if an employee recommends a candidate, they get interviewed and they stay with you for 1 year. Now that employee that made that referral can get a stipend of $250, for example. Other things when it comes to retention more is a training program. So we're seeing a lot of success with buddy systems. So when you hire someone, they come on and you train them, setting them up not just with a trainer or with their supervisor, but also a peer that they can call a buddy. They can ask those questions to. If they feel silly, they can feel connected with someone. Maybe you pay for those two to go out and get coffee or lunch to just develop that relationship. Buddy systems are really helping. Also, when it comes to attracting, your culture and your benefit programs are huge. So in your culture, do you have any celebrations? Do you have any committees? Do you let people work from home? Again, what makes you cool? We need to be advertising that when we're attracting talent. The next part is an affirmative action plan. Not every organization needs to have these, and I won't spend a ton of time on this, but it is important if you do need to. So an affirmative action plan is governed by the Office of Federal Contract and Compliance Programs, or what's called the OFCCP. If you're an employer with a total amount of 10,000 in federal contracts, you must agree to not discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, and all the other protected classes. But if you're an employer with 50 or more employees and a single federal contract that exceeds the amount of 50,000, you're required to have an affirmative action plan. So affirmative action plans, they make sure that we are looking internally to make sure we're paying people fairly and we are not discriminating. We want to make sure that all of our open positions are available to a diverse pool of candidates. And if you have questions on affirmative action plans, please take my information down at the end or message Kristy at Relion, because we have programs and we could talk about this topic alone for about an hour. But if you do not have one, keep this on your radar. Up next, we have what has changed. So we talked a little bit about how to attract people. Those were generally good practices even before the pandemic came along. So what are we doing differently as we're approaching 2022? So hopefully you have your notepads out. Here are some potential major changes. One we talked about is just following up more stringently and frequently with people that you are recruiting with. So even if they have a first day coming up, sending an email to them the day before or the week before with a new hire packet and reminding them of their first day will eliminate or hopefully decrease ghosting if you're seeing that. I took this straight from the director of the recruiting program at the Skywalk Group, and in his words, recruiting and remote working options are a must. They have to go hand in hand. It's a new world. And many positions, we cannot facilitate that. And those aren't the positions that we're talking about right now. If you're in production or if you're a warehouse manager, we need those people to be on site. But as Gen Z is coming in and as the pandemic is having different variants, we need to be a little more flexible when it comes to people getting sick, having those options to work from home or take a laptop. It's something we need to start considering. Let's see, addressing workplace safety. This is new. Back before 2021, we didn't necessarily, 2020, excuse me, we didn't necessarily have to talk about the safety provisions at work. Your recruiters these days must be talking about that in the interviews, telling people what we do to keep our workplace a safe and coronavirus pandemic illness free work environment. We've never really had to talk before about our cleaning schedules and what happens when you call off and how often we are providing sick leave to people and whether or not that's paid. That has become a focus when it comes to recruiting. Again, even I have to remind myself that people are still scared, even if they're vaccinated. So many positions we can post, garner applicants, but that post and pray method really has been tough. If we're posting something on Indeed, waiting for candidates to apply, screening the tons of applicants that just barely have qualifications, if that. We really should be working towards a more proactive way of recruiting, which would be called sourcing. So sourcing is actually taking the time to find the person that you are interested in, what characteristic, what skills, what languages do they need to be able to speak, and then going out to find those candidates, even if they haven't even applied. So this is what we are doing on the on-recruit model. This is what we recommend employers are doing as well. Not simply to post and pray, but go out and find that person. Don't wait for them to come to you. Another option would be keeping track of those that, quote, came close. So if you have been interviewing several people, it came down to maybe 2 or 3, and you decided to go forward with candidate A, you want to make sure that candidate B and C you keep warm for the future. Put them in a file that you can find them easily. Make sure when you turn down their application for this position specifically, you tell them to keep you in mind for employment elsewhere, and then we'll be reaching out to them if we see anything that's suitable. This is 1, good for your brand, and 2, you're developing your own pipeline on the next time you have to hire. We're moving on to train, which is the next part. This is where we start to talk about retention. So when it comes to training, we have leadership courses and customer service courses that we'll talk just a little bit about, but there are lots of things you can do with training. First part to talk about are those specific job skills. So when we bring in someone and it's their first day, they show up with a box and a nice plant, they're super excited. We need to, as employers, keep them excited. That's our job. If they make it in the front door, which we hope they do, we need to be the ones that make it a great first day. We want to be prepared with a plan. We want to try to make it fun in some way, shape, or form. And then another thing that people are doing to really get people excited is providing them swag. So if you have organization shirts with logos or tumbler cups or coffee mugs, anything, we want them to feel like they are a part of your culture from that first day. We want to begin with the ending in mind. So what does success look like after their first day? Then we can think a little more long-term. What does success look like for their 30, 60, and 90 days? What do we want them to have accomplished by 6 months? And then even 1 year. Having this written down and being able to give them a plan will help them have things to look forward to, gauge their own success, and also meet the expectations that you have as an employer. And when we have these, it's important to actually have those built-in checkup meetings. So not just reviews that are annual, but hey, it's your 30-day. Let's meet. Do you have the tools you need to be successful? Hey, it's your 60 days. We've noticed that if you focus on these areas, we can improve in XYZ. We want to be communicating with these employees that we are hiring and the employees we have now to retain them. Having that training curriculum to give them is huge. Is your organization the kind of organization that can whip out some videos or guides or on the job shadowing? How do you do on the job training? And is it the way that they want to learn? Is it the way you want to learn? What we're doing on the HR side these days is we're actually surveying the newbies. How did your training process go? How did you feel on your first day? Do you feel connected to the organization, and what can we do better to make sure that we are retaining you? We also talked a little bit about that buddy system and the mentorship program. This is really helpful for any of the unwritten culture expectations. So something as simple as, hey, coffee is actually made at 7:30 in the morning. So the first person who comes in makes coffee. If you're planning on coming in at 7:15, please do so. If you're coming in at 8 o'clock and you see that it's empty, please refill it. So some of these even unwritten culture expectations can really be ironed out if someone has a buddy or a mentor to go through this with them. The next part is, what does your team need to know to be successful? So putting together that training program really gets people feeling like they are a part of a team, especially when the executive level or the leadership level is participating in trainings along with them. Examples of these might be anti-harassment trainings every year. There could be fundamental leadership leadership skills that people need to be successful. So as we're promoting people to people managers, what training are we giving them to be successful? Diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings should be done every year now. We want to show employees that this is high on our priority list and we're prepared to address this. Safety is another huge one. Emotional intelligence, if that's something we prioritize, we should have that. Teaching your managers how to do one-on-ones is another huge one. And then also with any new job, there has to be a lot of technology pieces that you're introducing them to. Are we giving them the training to be successful? And then allow us to expect certain performance milestones to be reached. Now, once we've figured out what your team needs to know, we should also spend time on what they want to know. So this is where we get into what makes you as an organization cool. We don't need to be all about the black and white anti-harassment trainings. We could also be putting together a culture club, for example. We could work our budget into providing life skill courses like cooking courses we've had clients do. We've had beginner Spanish speaking lessons for employees who want to start dipping their toe in the bilingual arena of business. Asking people what they want to know really is a unique way you can engage employees and not make training so scary or so black and white, but also make it fun and make it something that they are excited to come to work today because there's this training. We like that our employer is taking time and budget dollars to invest in us. A lasting impression is the way we go at the Skywalk Group. So the most effective trainings, not all, but the most effective, they have a framework for learning new pieces. Yes, some of training is purely lecture sometimes, but you need to provide context. How does this training actually apply to you as an individual or to you as an employee, and how do you use it? And then practice. If we aren't bringing up what we train our employees on regularly, they will forget it. If we don't have engaging activities in trainings, they will come, be talked to, and leave. Much like this training, or not training, but this presentation today. It is not interactive, and I wish it could be. Okay, so it all starts with the leaders. This is what the Skywalk Group kind of focuses on with our trainings. When you have managers who can be successful leaders, it helps you reduce turnover because they're making those engaging relationships with employees, and increases engagement because people feel like they can be a part of the decision making, and improves performance, and it can develop a culture based on growth. Right? So when we have managers who are leading from the top, when our executive team and our leaders are appropriately handling, resolving conflicts, managing complaints, etc., hopefully we see that that's disseminated all the way throughout the employee population. It really does start with what are our leaders doing. If we had to pick out 12 essential skills of leadership, so if you're going to be a manager of people, what do you need to know to be successful? These are the 12 courses that we start with, beginning with leadership and communication. So again, does your organization have the fundamental skills to be successful with someone? Other pieces when it comes to trainings is, are we tech savvy? Do we have boosters and reminders? Do we have 48-hour reinforcement? So yes, we went through an intensive training, but let's talk about it before you forget a couple days later. Bringing up those worksheets, doing skills practice. All of these are ways that we can retain and train employees so that they become a part of your culture and you're not growing without them. Our models, at least, this is just a placeholder slide to say we have different videos for office industries, industrial industries, and also healthcare industries. So if you need tools or templates, we can be a resource for you. And then finally, why we're all here, the retaining piece. Arguably, that training piece has a lot to do with retention, but let's talk specifically about what we can do to retain individuals. At the Skywalk Group, what we call retention really comes from our human resources initiatives. We have HR consultants that become a teammate of an organization. So two things we really focus on are employers that are large, that need a project outsourced, such as, okay, now I know I need an affirmative action plan, but I don't have time to put that together. I want a certified human resources person to come in, be our teammate, put this together for us and do a project. Or we work with organizations that are just so small that they do not need to hire their own full-time HR person. They want almost a rent an HR director or generalist kind of opportunity. So these are some of the pieces that we work on as human resources consultants for our clients. However, oops, I went way ahead. Go back one more. Oh, now it's skipping all over the place. I apologize for that. Within your own walls is a good place to start when it comes to retention. So taking a look at what's happening with your organization. Maybe you've noticed ghosting, maybe you haven't, but why are people leaving? And if they aren't leaving and you're not seeing that yet, can we talk to them about why they would even be considering it? So SHRM statistics say that disengagement is one of the biggest reasons people are looking elsewhere and they are leaving right now, other than the grass is greener on the other side concept that we talked about earlier. One of the biggest ones is isolation. Some people are really thriving with the work from home hybrid model. Some people feel so isolated, and about 28% of the disengagement that we are seeing in the workforce has to do with this. Some people, it's because they're uncomfortable returning to work. Some people are sick of what in their terms looks like picking up the slack for teammates. So if they're witnessing any unfair treatment, there is no bigger way to lead to disengagement with an organization. Finally, we have just two more: no recognition for their efforts or work. So particularly the millennials are famous for this, getting an attaboy and an attagirl, or recognition for not just doing well, but also, maintaining the fort, or holding down fort. We want to make sure we're recognizing people for that. And then not feeling connected to the team or the work. This is where what makes you cool, what is different about your culture, that really comes into play here. So take a look within your own walls and potentially ask some employees or get a focus group together so we can determine what any issues might be. We've talked a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion, and they have added an extra word in here. Belonging is what's happening right now in this field of study. So what SHRM is telling us is that Black or Hispanic workers are more likely to be resigning right now. And if we're on the DEIB bandwagon, if we are taking this seriously, if we are doing our best to make sure our applicants are available to others and that we're diversifying in the workforce, is it actually as effective as we think it is? Some of the different initiatives with DEIB include that affirmative action plan we talked about in the beginning, really investing in inclusivity and belonging. So not just having a diverse population, but making it genuine and actually giving them the same chance to show up at the table, to have decisions, to challenge the process, and to not participate in too much groupthink. And then finally, a huge way we can prove that DEIB is important to us is starting with the executives and the leadership team. So if we are doing these initiatives, if we are making our applications available, if we are truly not discriminating when it comes to those interviews, are we tying our executive compensation to DEI goals? That is something that larger organizations are starting to do. So maybe the executive comp or the bonus plan is tied to, are we truly diversifying our workforce? We're seeing that organizations that are doing that are making it public to the company themselves. This is how your leaders are being compensated, or this is one way in which this is the case. And that's how seriously the board of directors may take this. The benefit package. This is maybe old news for you, but it is huge. It's never been bigger than right now when it comes to retaining people, but also recruiting people. What does your benefit package look like? Many times the ones we jump straight to are health insurance, dental, vision, maybe long-term disability, short-term disability, life insurance, etc. How do we get those rates down with our brokers? How do we invest the most we can as employers so it's affordable for those employees? That's what maybe most people think of when they talk about a benefit package. Helps to recruit and it helps to retain because employees need that in their life. There are so many other pieces that come with your benefit package. What we're doing on the HR side is we're working with employers to make sure we are writing down in a fun way. We have almost a handout that's called our company's benefit package. We want you to be defining what that looks like, but also, again, shouting it from a mountaintop. What is your work-life balance situation? Do you allow flexibility? Is it all in person where you work? Is it hybrid? Is it remote? Is it if someone needs to be out, for example, if you're sick? What does that look like? And let's define it. Let's shout that out. People are really looking for an employer who's going to help with the work-life balance. One of the fun things the Skywalk Group has done for years is in the summer, they designate a certain number of months and they have early out Fridays. So if recruiters are successful and they put in their hours, come noon on Fridays, you get to go enjoy your Friday. Go outside, grab a margarita, do whatever makes you happy. Spend time with your family. Another way to do work-life balance would just be working with the moms and dads out there when it comes to employee sports, or excuse me, sports, baseball, soccer. Are we letting them go to those trainings? Are we letting them go to those games? And are we really allowing them to flex their schedule on a day-to-day basis? If you are, which many of us are, we need to be talking more about it. We talked about those health insurance premiums. However, many employers can get health insurance premium discounts if they work from a wellness package. So if you have incentives to get people walking, to drink water, to if we have a wellness culture club, for example, some of these initiatives really help your employees stay safe and healthy, but they also can help you from a dollar amount. And people, especially Gen Zers that are entering the workforce, really care about these wellness packages. Then there are all those perks. We talk about early off Fridays, being able to have a healthy work-life balance. What do your team outings look like? And how has that changed now that social distancing is a thing? Do you ever have breakfast days? Have you ever had fun Friday t-shirt days? Or do we have company swag that we provide people? Whatever it is that makes you cool, we want this to be written in a benefit package and we want to be using it in the recruiting process. Just yesterday, I was on client site and they said, yes, we're really close to the trail in Hiawatha. So what we do is we encourage people and managers to have walking one-on-ones. So that alone could be a part of your benefit package. So we need to think outside the scope of just insurance. Then we have succession. This is a big one. We want to be able to have room for advancement because employees are excited when they know that they have growth opportunities in your organization. Now, some people are not looking for any more responsibilities to manage others. They just like to come in every day, they clock in, they do their work, they're successful, and they leave because where they get their drive from is external and not internal to their work. However, most people like to know where they're going, what they can be doing to get that next raise, how they can make themselves more of an asset to the employer, etc. This is huge. Employees want to be talking about this, and it's important for you as employers to know that as people are ghosting us in this day and age, as people are resigning, the boomers are leaving, what can we be doing to set up a succession plan so that your intellectual property is held on to, it's retained, and that we can be building people from within in addition to recruiting from outside of your organization. So we want to be using performance reviews to talk about succession. We want to be using coaching sessions with your managers to talk about this. And we want to be surveying employees to say who wants to grow, who wants to be a people manager someday, and what kind of training do we need to get you there. Something else with succession, not just assuming employees want something, but asking them. Not everyone who is successful in the role they have right now is meant to be a people leader someday. Sometimes that can be trained up. Sometimes it's innate and you want to finely tune it. Sometimes people don't have the skills or they're not interested in that. So succession doesn't necessarily mean we go from a junior to a senior to a manager to a director. It could mean let's expand your duties into a different field that you're interested in, whether that is giving them creative liberties to improve processes, maybe talk about new products and services that you have, think through things to give more ideas. It doesn't necessarily need to be this ladder situation or this staircase that you're looking at on the screen, but it could be expansion of duties in a way that really makes an employee feel that they are growing. So let's talk about what not to do. We're wrapping up here. We have a few more minutes before I believe Kristy will open it up to questions. What not to do right now with all of the different influences going on in our world. One thing that I have seen be unsuccessful with the employers that we're working with right now is making hard line decisions about returning to work or staying remote without educating the employees on the decision-making process. No, you do not, as employers, owe explanation for your decision-making to your employees, but employees are so scared. They're so concerned. This is an unprecedented time. The way your organization is handling returning to work or what calls you're making when it comes to being sick and whether or not they should stay in. We should be talking more about this, whether those are town halls, weekly newsletter meetings, management meetings that then disseminate the information to supervisors and so on. What we're doing and why is really important right now as employees want to feel connected to their employers so they're not leaving. Withhold reasons behind a decision. We already talked about that. This sounds elementary, but we want to just take an extra step, look in the mirror, make sure we are not on purpose or accidentally pushing a political agenda on employees. Back there in our more immediate past, we had, it almost was, if you're wearing a mask, you have a sign on your head saying you're a Democrat. If you're not wearing a mask, you have a sign on your head saying you're a Republican. We need to make sure, we had an election recently, we need to make sure that when it comes to mask mandates or however we feel about diversity, equity, and inclusion, whichever spectrum we're on politically, we are making sure to not put pressure on our employees based on our own opinions and facts. We want to make sure we stick to the research, we educate employees, we provide them with areas that they can go out and do their own research, but we want to be really careful about pushing any political agendas right now. We also don't want to make people feel expendable. So one thing that seems smart that many employers are doing is posting general postings out there. So catch-all jobs, for example. So if we have a mostly administrative organization or even a mostly manufacturing or production industry, if we're posting those general postings and catching just as many different applicants so we can use them later, that might be a good idea to build your pipeline. But we also have to be careful of the culture implications that these may have if I'm successfully working at the Skywalk Group, but then I see out there in Indeed that the Skywalk Group is recruiting for just blanket human resources positions. In some cases, we've noticed that employees are catching on to that, and it's making them feel expendable, like they don't matter to the organization. So we want to be careful with how we're doing that. Blind postings are one option. Just building up a pipeline instead of constantly having something out there is another option. And not saying this is a bad idea. We just need to be careful about what this could mean for our culture. Let's see. The last one would be have more accommodations for leadership and harsher expectations for your entry-level staff. So what this means is be careful as employers to make sure that we aren't accidentally letting leaders take their laptops home when they're sick, but not letting your frontline staff take laptops home or work from home or call off or have that paid sick leave. We want to make sure that what we are doing when it comes to accommodating this crazy time with the employees we have and keeping culture in mind, we want to make sure it's consistent. Because even though we may think with leaders, oh, they've always had this worked out, it's not any different, or no one will notice they're being treated differently, we're seeing that employees truly are noticing it, and it's really disengaging them. So we want to make sure whatever processes we do have, it's consistent. And with that, just a little summary. We talked about our on-recruit services if you need recruiting assistance. We talked about our HR consulting and tools that you could use if any of this applies to you today. And then we also have some training tools, resources, and development pieces. If you're interested in, we can be a resource for all of this for you. So it is 10:30 on the dot, and I promised Kristy that we would wrap up. So I want to say thanks for being here today. Hope you'll stick around for any questions if you have them. But this is my contact information on the screen here, and would love to hear from you if you have any questions, or if you would like any tools, or you would like to get coffee, talk about some of these resources. We are here for you. So with that, Kristy, I'll let you take it away, and I will stop sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Samantha. Lots of really, really great information. So for those of you on the line that may have missed anything or got distracted, we will post, again, this recording on our website. I will send you all a link to it once that's available. The other thing I wanted to mention really quickly before we get into the questions is you will also receive a link to an evaluation. We'd love to know how you felt about the information that was presented, because we're always trying to improve these sessions that we do. So I have a couple of questions here for you, Samantha. The first one is, do we yet know what additional impact that this new COVID emergency temporary standard that requires employers with 100 or more employees to either require vaccinations or testing will have on the job market? Do we know if it'll be more of a negative impact? Will it have a positive impact? Any thoughts on that, or is it too early to tell?
Absolutely. That's such a great question. And we are seeing it change and be different depending on the organization we're in. So right now we're spending, the consulting team is spending a lot of time with the long-term care facilities and that industry. So nursing homes, as that is one of the mandatory pieces that must require masks coming up. And we are surprised to be seeing that people who work at nursing homes, of the, let's say, 10 that we're working with right this moment, we are surprised at the level of employees that will truly be resigning rather than being vaccinated. In that market, it's already hard to recruit, and now people are resigning, and it will be even harder to continue recruiting. So in that market, much more difficult. In other markets, we're seeing that the employers under that mandated employee population are deciding to be proactive in their mandating it. Some employees like it, some don't, and they're resigning. But what we've been doing is working with the employers to say, if we make this mandatory, because we're getting ahead of the curve, how many people are vaccinated, how many are not, and what is the likelihood that the non-vaxxers will resign? And we're doing assessments before we make those calls. With those that it's mandatory for, the data says that the more people that are vaccinated, the healthier the employee population will be. However, it is not something that the common person in Iowa agrees with. I think the last statistic I saw was 50% of Iowa still isn't on board with the mandate. So we will see resignations. I think, to summarize, it will have a positive effect on the health rates and how much COVID may or may not be transmitted right now. But I think it will make even more difficult for the employers to recruit, and we will see more resignations of the employees that we already have. So it depends on the industry, but it will be the next change coming up.
Thank you. And I will add from an OSHA perspective, because OSHA is going to be the one to develop this standard and enforce it, so to speak. I will add that we just don't know, first of all, when they're going to have that standard developed. And I think there's already lawsuits trying to challenge it. So we know the way government works. It could be a while, it could get done really quickly, but once we know the impact that it will have as far as the standard and the employer requirements, we will certainly pass that on to you all on the line. Samantha, have you seen any, I'll call it quote unquote, out of the box recruitment strategies or initiatives of late, and have they worked? something that might just seem kind of off the wall, but has worked for any of the employers that you're working with?
Yes, something that I think has been maybe not off the wall. It might have been happening for a long time, but it's suddenly on our radar in a very big way, are open-ended interviews. So you can even drive by an Arby's and it will say, every Wednesday, we have these 2 hours slotted for open interviews. Anyone can come and we'll interview you at this time. I've also seen, I think that's kind of an out of the box way to get people to come in, whether or not they have a resume, whether or not you can reach them on social media, etc. Another thing, we are starting to see employers hire on the spot. So if people are coming in and saying, hey, can I start with you? Whether or not they have a drug testing program or they have a background check screening program, they are starting to make sure they are working with partners that can facilitate these screening methods much quicker, even that day, and hiring them and having them go out onto the floor or start that day. Now, if that's the case, as a human resources individual, I would argue that we need to be very careful to make sure that is streamlined with everyone, so we aren't treating people differently. And we do need to get certain papers filled out before someone can technically start. The I-9s and the state and federal W-4s would be some of them, but we're seeing more hiring on the spot, and we're seeing more open-ended interview days being scheduled.
Because sometimes when you know, right? If they're going to be a good
Sometimes.
fit.
Sometimes.
Good. Is there any end in sight for this current job market, or do you feel like this is going to kind of drag on for some time?
Well, that's a good question. From what we've learned when we talk about the silver tsunami, there's a whole generation, the baby boomers are leaving. And if employers do not get creative in how they can attract the new incoming workforce of Gen Z, we will have a gap in coverage. It's just as many people that are resigning, are we hiring just as many to backfill those positions? Are we getting more creative with being more technology focused? Maybe not all of them need to be backfilled. And are we really being accommodating and attractive to Gen Z? I think my prediction would be there will be a struggle, but it's up to the employers individually and specifically on what their strategy is going to be to just change the idea and the concept and the image of the person that they're used to working with.
Do you think more employers may go after or start recruiting in the high schools, much like colleges do, rather than, having a child go to college for 2 to 4 years, if they have, a skill set that could benefit them now? Is that something that employers are looking at doing?
Yes, I've heard, we have many clients that are in the trades organizations, and they've always had a focus on starting to recruit from the high school programs. But we're starting to see even employers outside of the trades, outside of manufacturing places, they want to be catching people through, in high school at career fairs, and then even helping them get through college. So by having a relationship with those individuals, by maybe having internships and giving them a stipend, an education stipend, you're already almost farming that individual that you hope someday will then come to fruition, work with you, and be able to reinvest in your workforce. So yes, it is never too early to develop those relationships. It's a great time to be having internships and making those connections with your local universities and even high schools. There are programs such as IJAG where you can go in and talk about your organization and your industry with high school students. There's a lot out there, and yes, that's a strategy to be taken that we would recommend.
Great. Just a few more questions. These next two are about remote employees. I think a lot of employers are trying to determine if the remote work can work for them, or a hybrid option, et cetera. So what tools, if any, are employers using to track productivity of remote employees? Because that seems to be the concern that's top of mind for a lot of employers on whether or not they can accommodate the remote workers, is productivity.
That's a great question. I personally and the team has not worked with any specific software on that. So I've heard people in larger organizations refer to, oh, I know how often their computer is turned on, or I'm monitoring them on Teams to see what their status is. So there are some tools and I'm sure statistical ways that you can gauge productivity. I'm not aware of them. But what I would say is making sure that performance expectations are clear. So when it comes to that work-life balance, in the end, do you need a salary employee to work 40 hours exactly, or do you need them to meet these explicit measures? Making sure that you talk to them about what you expect and maybe when you expect it, but it's mostly the quality of what you expect. Defining those programs and then working with them is huge. In other cases, you can survey the employees themselves, you can do performance reviews, but another big way to generate data is to ask your clients. So for example, if you have customer facing clients or if people are taking phone calls, doing customer service, make sure to survey your clients to see if they're satisfied. Could they get through to someone when they called? Are we getting back to emails quick enough? Is this one person that they're tied or connected to really getting back to them in a timely manner? I would start with those areas maybe.
Great. And the second one on remote work, another concern that a lot of employers have is culture. So you've spent all this time building this, what you think is a great culture. How do you maintain that if you're sending your employees, whether it's full-time remote or hybrid, how do you maintain that culture?
Great question. And this is where you really need to get creative. Now, if you're following the CDC guidelines, if you're complying with the OSHA recommendations, people are getting together as teams more and more frequently. The Skywalk Group HR team, for example, just yesterday, we have a team builder once a month. And this month we decided to partner with a local nonprofit in town called Trees Forever. And we went to an organization and we used our team builder to be outside and help people pick up free trees at Beaver Park. And that was our team builder. So we physically were together. However, other things you can do remotely would be we've seen clients have everyone dial in and have gingerbread cookie houses mailed to everyone's home. And then we all dial in, we all bought the activities and the materials, and we all did gingerbread cookies together. We've seen blogs about get to know your teammate. And there's a new teammate that's highlighted every month. So we get to know people. We've seen different games you can play. There are apps such as House Party, where everyone dials into this House Party app and you can do trivia together in real time and you can be connecting. So I've also seen clients do as little as a 15-minute coffee break that they schedule and they send out to all staff on their Outlook calendar. So just getting together, having one topic in mind, or going through a question like, where was your first job when you worked in high school? Things like that. I think it's about making the effort to get people together in the same time. So you really want to get creative. And if you would like more ideas, I'd love to connect with you.
Perfect. The last question I have in our little bank is, have you seen a generational divide in what benefits and perks are preferred by employees?
Yes, we have seen that. So as boomers are exiting the workforce, boomers are much more concerned with their retirement allocations, such as 401k. As millennials and Gen Zs are coming in, they are much more concerned with work-life balance, much less concerned with what's going in their 401k. Something else when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example, if we're hiring people that may not be native born to the United States, having leave programs that would allow people to take PTO together in big chunks so they can go visit their families in their home country. So for example, if someone came from Kenya, for example, as what happened in one of my other clients, they were able, when they worked with an organization for a certain amount of time, they could accrue up to 3 weeks of PTO. Now they changed their handbook to make it so that people could take those 3 weeks of PTO in one solid chunk that would allow that employee from Kenya to go visit their family every year. And it was something that their clients came to expect, that employee really appreciated, and it allowed us to retain that individual. individual. So yes, there are differences in what employees are interested in. And if I had to say what the most in-demand one right now is the Gen Zers want the opportunity to work from home at least sometimes.
Perfect. Wow, that was a lot of really, really great ideas and information and takeaways. Thank you so much, Samantha. We really, really appreciate it. Again, I will send out a link to an evaluation for everybody. So if you do need anything additional from Samantha, I can be the go-between to get that for you. Thanks again, everyone. So just a couple of things on related resources and services from Relion related specifically to this presentation is ironically a lot of this, you'll see a lot of stuff pop up that is relative to some of the things that Samantha mentioned. So for example, through our portal, you can get access to content for you as managers and HR professionals. We have a guide for managing remote workers, as well as a newsletter, an HR newsletter for you if you are considering a hybrid work model, some things you might want to take into consideration, and then leading those remote teams if you are currently doing it or working towards it. Virtual recruitment strategies. Again, these are all in line with some of the things that Samantha talked about. We also have an employee handbook template out there with benefits and personnel policies. Here's just a quick look at the table of contents. And the reason I'm showing this is all of these policies that you see out here, we do have templates for those. So if you need any specific policies, we can help with that as well. We also have content for employees, so employee facing materials and documents. So Samantha talked about safety. Yes. In this context, it was, protecting employees from, getting sick or getting COVID. But in my world, we're also talking about safety from OSHA compliance to work comp best practices. So how do we avoid those worker injuries as well? So toolbox talks for your employees, no matter the industry that you're in. We have that for all industries. Samantha talked about sexual harassment. So if that's something she talked about in training, if you need sexual harassment training, we have those materials for you as well. OSHA compliance training, we have the content there as well. Samantha also talked about wellness. We have a monthly wellness newsletter that if you would like to sign up for it, we could get you an automatic distribution where this comes to your email inbox on a monthly basis. And it just has really, really good content from a variety of different topics. Pandemic financial stress, breast cancer awareness month is in October, prevention tips, etc. There's always a great healthy recipe out there too. So if you're looking for something to engage your employees, this could be a culture thing, particularly if you have remote employees, keeping them engaged and passing information along. This could be a great tool for you as well. We also do have a client portal I mentioned. In addition to some of the templates and resources that I just showed you, there's access, as I mentioned, to toolbox talks and safety materials, as well as checklists and those policy templates that I mentioned. There is an actual tool out there called a handbook builder and many other HR tools. There's a learning management system. If you have those remote employees and it's difficult to get or impossible to get everyone together in a room to do some of these trainings, we do have that learning management system as well. And then just other risk management, safety, OSHA, and HR training resources. And there's also an opportunity for you to manage your OSHA logs if that's a requirement that's applicable to you based upon your size and your industry. And then other services that we offer at Relion, safety, work comp, best practices, as well as OSHA compliance, consultation and training. We can help with policy development. We can even review that employee handbook and give you some ideas of where there might be gaps, what additional policies you might consider, again, based upon your organization size. You may or may not need a certain policy. So if you need anything additional from Samantha or myself, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is here. And Anything else you need, please reach out. I can get you in touch with Samantha if you have additional questions for her. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We really, really hope that you found this valuable, and watch your inbox for a link to an evaluation. Have a great day.